Hi friends, today I'm going to talk about an assassination that happened in the last century, almost 100 years back. But the echoes of that bullet still dominate the world today. There have been many assassinations and many murders, and in fact, many people killed by bullets in the last 100 or so years. But I believe that none has had such echoing effects as this one. It is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the Crown Prince of Austria-Hungary Empire in 1914. The bullets that led to the First World War, the killing of millions, made the Second World War almost inevitable, and as an outcome was responsible for the world map as we know it today. Let me begin by talking about the situation just before the World War. Mark my words, you would come out of this video realizing how one incident can affect us even today. Some of you may say that look, maybe the war was inevitable. Had it not been for this assassination, something else would have happened. Well, many such occasions did happen, but the world powers were able to sit back calmly and solve them. But this assassination had such deep impacts that it had become almost impossible to resolve the issue. Having said that, there are many other possibilities that could have happened in history, but we today discuss and debate things that happened. So, what had happened is just before the First World War, there had been almost 50, 60 odd years of relative calm in the world. There had been wars off and on, but the great powers had not really fought since 1870s when Germany was consolidated and fought France and okay. Now the whole world model was such that Britain was the supreme colonial power, followed by France. Russia had managed to conquer a huge portion of the eastern side, as you know, and had become this big country which had huge domination over large parts of Central Asia, as well as played a lot of politics in the European side, specifically in the Slavic regions, okay, where it had conflicts with the multinational empire called Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary, which is a mix of many nationalities, though the monarch and the leadership was German, there was the Slavs, there was the Hungarians, all of these people, Romanians and Poles, etc., etc. And then there was the German Empire. Germany, Austria, Hungary were the predominant powers of, you can say, Central Europe. And then, of course, the Islamic world was dominated by the Turkic Empire, the Ottoman Empire. Now, many times there were conflicts before this where France and Germany quarreled over some colonies and all, but that conflict was avoided by great power conferences. Many times Austria-Hungary Empire and Russian Empire had a lot of issues, and even the Russians and the Ottomans had a lot of issues, but they were again resolved. In this context, what happened was Russia used to pump up the small country of Serbia, which wanted to break up the Austria-Hungary Empire so that the Slavic nations under Serbia could become this country called Yugoslavia, United Slavs, Southern Slavs. There was a you can say terrorist group or whatever you want to call it, freedom fighter group funded by Serbia, armed by Serbia, which operated in the Austria-Hungary Empire. Okay, and they did a lot of bomb trying to liberation and whatever, you know what they do, right? So Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the crown prince. To be the king was of course the very old Frank Joseph I. Archduke Franz Ferdinand had married a very normal girl, you can say, Sophie, who was never accepted in the courtly circles. Therefore, then most of the royal family did not accept her, recognize her, respect her. That's as it said. And it is said that the marriage was agreed upon only with the condition that while the Franz Ferdinand would become king, the successors that were to be born out of this marriage will not be royal, in the sense they will not become kings. Sophie therefore always felt, not respected in the royal household, and Franz Ferdinand always tried to get his wife her due respect. In that connection, when he was doing a survey of, he was traveling to Sarajevo for an official functions and all, he took his wife along. At the time, some officials, they say, told him that there is a threat and therefore probably he should avoid taking his wife along or having her in the open car and, in the parade and in the functions. But probably no one knows what the mind was. But one part it said is he dismissed because many such issues had been raised in the past, and they very well could have been out of intention of not wanting her in her presence at all. So he ignored those things. There was a lot of there were around 6 assassins of the Black Hand who had thought that whoever gets a chance will kill. And I don't want to go into the details of the assassination. There were a lot of bungled attempts, a lot of people tried killing, and there was one failed attempt already. But yet, the prince felt that, they could not back off. So they, in the next time, they already after one attempt had been made at his car, after doing his speech and all, he again went with his wife. And this time, the assassin got very, very, very lucky. The car stopped just in front of him. I mean, his other friends had failed, and this guy, Philip, the assassin, was just sitting and thinking, okay, what do I do? And suddenly, out of pure luck, the car of the man who he wants to kill is stops right in front of him, giving him point blank range chance to do it. And he does it, what he had to do. Both husband and wife were killed. But moving on, I want to tell you what happened. What happened was there was outrage in Austria Hungary, and Austria Hungary was forced to completely tell Serbia a huge list of demands, basically saying that you have to crush all the terrorism and terrorist camps, etc., in your country. And while Serbia, because there was a lot of global outcry at such kind of an event, agreed, there were many very strong demands from Austria, including that it should be the Austrian authorities who should be allowed to come inside Serbia and do their own investigation, etc., etc., which Serbia felt was violating their sovereignty. Both sides took strong positions. Austria threatened that if its conditions are not met, there will be war. Russia, which had constantly supported Serbia, even if the Russian Tsar Nicholas did not want a war, he could not back out because it will be absolute humiliation for Russia. Germany, after the German Tsar, after thinking a lot, William decided that he could not afford to not back Austria here. And France and Britain knew that, there had been treaties all around that they would stand with Russia here. It came down to it, and there was a war indeed. Austria invades Serbia, Russia mobilizes, Germany, all of that happened. And as we know, the First World War happened. Eventually, Italy joined on the sides of Britain, France, and Russia. And the Central Powers, that is Germany and Austria-Hungary, managed to convince the Ottoman Turks to join on their side. What unfolded are events that are still, as I said, shaping humanity. Once the Ottoman Turks jumped on the side of Germany, Britain started playing its divide and rule and got the Arabs, like the Saud family and all, to revolt against the Turks. Eventually, at the end of the First World War, you had the map of Middle East as you know it today. All the Arab countries and Iraq and Syria and Saudi Arabia with this kind of map, and Turkey being reduced to this small country. All of this happened because of this. In the intense war that happened, I think I've discussed in another First World War vlog, Russian economy collapsed. and Russia was pushed into communism. Once Germany was, when all of this was happening, America, after a point, which had so far, since its inception, never ever indulged in world affairs and all these, and the mess of all of these European powers, could not stay away. America jumped into the war, and that was the first time America entered into world politics. We know what America has been doing in the last 100 years. This was the start. Finally, when the Treaty of Versailles ending the First World War signed, it was so harsh that most people believed that there would be repercussions, and of course 20 years later there were repercussions in the name of the Second World War. So in a way I can say that this bullet led to the firing of millions of more bullets, and the new map of the world, with the demolition of all this Austria-Hungary and Germanic empires, as Europe as we know it, Middle East as we know it, was born. America as a superpower as we know it was also born out of this. Finally, when Britain had to bring its colonial troops to Europe to fight, and when these people saw Britishers dying under German bullets, when they saw that Britishers were also, in a way you can say, facing the same problems that they were, they realized that if they can fight for the British are nothing great. We can revolt and get our freedom. The First World War sowed the seeds of confidence in most of the Asian countries, especially India, that we can throw out Britain, and the British economy never really could cope up after the First World War, and that's why you see after the First World War the demand for Indian independence grows much faster. I leave you with the thoughts not of what all followed, but I again want to end up with the man who wanted respect for his wife. It's a tragic story, but it's a very, you can say, in a way, a sad love story too. Thank you. Bye.